talking to a fellow I sponsor. He's got 40 years. Today on the phone, I said, it's about being in tune. It's like a car, airplane, or a boat. If we're not in tune, we run ragged. But when we're in tune with ourselves and God, we emitted what's called an aura. And the aura is the energy that comes within. Sometimes I feel like I'm a piece of flypaper. I can't keep people off, and I hadn't even opened my mouth yet. And that's the gift.
Well, hello, friends of Bill W. and other friends. You have landed on Sober Speak. My name is John M. I am an alcoholic, and we are glad you're all here, especially newcomers. Newcomers, that is, both to recovery as a whole and newcomers to this podcast. Sober Speak is a podcast about recovery centered around the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. My job here on Sober Speak is simple. My job is to provide a platform to the amazing stories of recovery all around us. Consider Sober Speak, if you will, your meeting between meetings. Please remember, we do not speak for AA or any 12-step community. We represent only ourselves. We are here to share our experience, strength, and hope with those who wish to come along for the ride. Take what you want and leave the rest at the curb for the trash man to pick up. Greetings from Studio AA, deep in the heart of Texas. That was the voice of our friend. One more time, Curtis J, that you heard at the beginning of this episode number 440. Yes, 440 episodes. And you are going to hear so much more from Curtis in un momento, but... Oh, excuse me, folks. I should have taken my decongestants today. I hope we get through this one okay without you having to hear me coughing and stuff a lot. But nonetheless, that was Curtis J. And you're going to hear much more from him in just a moment. But first things first, this episode, this one right here, the one that is ringing in your ears right now, is brought to you by, is made possible by Anonymous, Susan, Todd, Kurt, and Audrey. And you ask yourself, you ponder, you say, what exactly did Anonymous, Susan, Todd, Kurt, and Audrey do? Well, they swung by our humble little website, www.soberspeak.com. They clicked on the little yellow donate tab and they made a contribution. So thank you so much, Anonymous, Susan, Todd, Kurt, and Audrey. This here episode number 440, is dedicated to Ewans. All right, so I'm going to do what a lot of people like me to do. I am going right on into the guest introduction, and we're going to start out here with Mr. Curtis J. Part 2. He is from Taylorsville, Kentucky, and this one is called Being in Tune with Ourselves and God. And I want to let you know also, after Curtis and I met up, he began sending me some daily text, and I should ask him. I'm not sure if he gets them from somewhere else or he creates all this from scratch, but they're very good. And my guess is if you wanted them as well, he would send them to you. They're just very, I don't know, every all these texts and emails I get always have their, a little bit of different flavor to them. And his is deep. And I mean that in a very positive way. I absolutely love what he sends over. So if you want it, just send me an email, John, JOHN at soberspeak.com, and I'll get you in touch with Mr. Curtis J. from Taylorsville, Kentucky. In this episode, we pick up where we left off last time. We discuss his suntan lotion adventures. His adventure in smuggling guns. You got to hear about all this. His relationship with the kings of cocaine, life in prison and what that was like. How you have to live your way into right thinking what it means to be in tune with God, the meaning of the divine spark. You could just tell from what I'm talking about, right? What his daily text must look like. Anyway, and much, much more. So, without further ado, I present to you Mr. Curtis J. Part 2, and we will have plenty listener feedback at the end of the episode here. Enjoy, Curtis. I said that I didn't take my decongestants today, and maybe I should have, but it doesn't sound like it, does it? It sounds like I've been on like a lot of decongestants. I don't know. I guess this is how I naturally am. Anyway, enjoy, Curtis. We'll talk to you at the end of the episode. Okay, everybody. So we're back again with Curtis because he was chock full of nuts on that first session, and we just had to have him back for a part 2 here. So, Curtis, once again, for those who may not have heard part 1, go ahead, introduce yourself, give your sobriety date, if you will, and tell people where you live in this great land of ours.
Thanks, John. Again, hello, everyone. My name's Curtis Johnson. I'm an alcoholic. By the grace of a very loving God, the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, and you people, I haven't found it necessary to consume any form of alcohol or take any mind or mood altering substances since March 15th or March 16th, 2015. And for that, I'm grateful. And I've learned that gratitude is by far more than a word or a feeling. Gratitude has to translate itself into a rigorous action of giving back that what's been so freely given to me in order to understand why I'm here today. And that is not my first sobriety day. I can reflect back on that again at another time. But this is the most important because it brings me to the moment where I'm at, and that moment is now.
All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about what we covered last time. And first of all, before we do that, though, the last time before we recorded your first session, we were talking a little bit, like 5 minutes before we started, about what you were going to be covering, and you and I asked you, how long, generally speaking, because when people who speak a lot, they know, hey, I kind of have a 45-minute talk, I have an hour talk, I have an hour and 15-minute talk, whatever the case may be. And I asked you about that, and you explained to me that once you get started, this is one of the most significant things in your life is to share your story. Do you remember what you said and kind of how you phrase that? Because I'd like you to share that with the audience, the excitement you get about sharing your story.
Yeah, John. And if I reflect back as a child, when we were children at birthday or at Christmas or some event, and you were given something. And it just was amazing, and you had to show and tell everybody about it, your sisters, your brothers, your friends. They got to see what I got. It's the same application that I found today in Alcoholics Anonymous because as I've searched as a 70, I was born January 23rd, 1953, so I'm up there in age, and everything I've looked for, that high I've tried to achieve, everything that's been given to me and taken away brings me to the moment I'm experiencing right now. And what I have right now is I can't keep unless I tell you all about it. But each and every one of us, unique in our own way, there's a road. And there's a traveling road of death. We call it trudging the road of destiny that I had to go through. And you talk about that. And, in order for me to understand that, and as I said earlier, John, I sponsor a lot of men and a whole bunch of women. When Don passed away, he sponsored hundreds and hundreds of people, men and women, and a lot of the women came to me because they said, "Curtis, you're as close to Don as we can get." And I said, "Oh no, what kind of trouble am I getting myself into now?" But there's really no trouble involved when we tell the truth, and what we're telling the truth is a way. There's a way, and there's a way of hope that rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed this path. We talked about that, Johnny. In my drinking problem, I think I stopped somewhere around my junior high school my junior high school where I first were introduced to something that took me out of my norm or my realm, and then I get into high school and it's Friday night and it's time to go to the dance after the football game, and I love women, but I'm scared to death of them. Can't even ask them to dance, and but all of a sudden something happened. I put that first can of Colt 45 stout malt liquor in me, and boy, oh boy, the game changes. The courage came, and I had my girlfriend within days. And life went on that way through junior high school, junior college. It was never a big problem for me, but it was something that I did every weekend. Once I got into junior college in Southern California, that was a different story because you had that opportunity to drink more. And then I went away to school in Wisconsin, and that's a whole different story. But you got to drink all the time. But the alcohol didn't seem to take me out of the ability to one be a student. I'm a brilliant person that just couldn't figure out how to drink. And I say figure out how to not drink because most people say, I've got to figure it out. But I want to share this message with everyone. There's nothing to figure out. We can't figure it out. This power, this God can. And He gives us this opportunity. And there has to be that opportunity in life to where there's nowhere else to go. So I went off to college, and then from college, I'm up there teaching tennis in Wisconsin for a while, and I get this. You'll like this part of the story, John. I get this call from a friend and says, Curtis, we got a job for you. This is around 1979. And I said, where are you at? And he said, well, I'm down in Daytona Beach, Florida. And I said, no, not going to Florida. My parents had left Southern Cal. Dad was now with Warner Communications. They were building these wonderful cable networks all over the country. I probably could have been a part of it all, but I was on my own fun. I was teaching tennis and having a lot of good times and drinking and partying. It was the bar, it was that high I was looking for. But when we get there, it would always go away. There's another hero of mine, Sandy Beach, tells a story about he was a pilot, and he tells a story about whether it was drugs, sex, rock and roll. It didn't matter. We'd get there, and it would go away. We would get there, and it would go away. We would get there, so we never found what we needed until he got into the program and found his answer in Alcoholics Anonymous too. But again, it was contingent on the daily maintenance of his spiritual conditioning. And that, as later on, when you go through the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, we begin to learn the importance of every day. We call it one day at a time. I truly comes down into one breath at a time. We take in air, we breathe in life. We give out air, we give life. If we don't breathe in or we don't breathe out, we don't have life. And there's two things that are inevitable in life. Once we come into the world, we're going to leave the world. So it's that in between feature. But here I am teaching tennis, and I'm having a good time. My goal was to get back to Southern California, and I could at any time. And he said, I got a job for you. I said, no, I ain't going to Florida. He said, no, you're a great sales marketing guy. It's a new suntan lotion company. And I said, suntan lotion company? I don't even get brown. I get burnt. I still go to the dermatologist once a month from something that happened 70 years ago, or 65 years ago. And I said, no, not interested. He said, no, you got to come down here. I said, no, I don't like Florida. I don't like Florida people. They used to come out. I didn't get into it earlier, but once I got to Southern California, I became a really good surfer too, and nobody surfed. I had my own lifeguard station number 10, south of the Huntington Beach Pier, where you might see 10 people out. Now there's thousands. But this was way back in the mid 60s and going in through the 60s. And I said, I'm not interested yet. And he said, no, let me tell you about it. I said, go ahead. He said, this suntan lotion company, these guys are mixing suntan lotion up in a bathtub in Holly Hill, Florida. And I said, well, who's that? He said, well, the guy's name's Ron Rice. Ron Rice was the owner for Hawaiian Tropic Suntan.
Gotcha.
Was the originator. And a guy by the name of Dave Hampton. Dave Hampton started an alternative suntan lotion company called Sun Solutions, and then came Panama Jack and Coppertone, and then all the commercial products. But he says they're mixing it up there, and they've got a contract with 36 hotels on Daytona Beach. And these hotels have these little tiki bars out there. And out on those tiki bars, and our contract is we'll take care of these pools for you as long as we can represent our suntan products out there. So we're going to put a boy and a girl out there at that tiki hut. And as these people come down, I said, "People come down." He said, "Yeah." Around the second week of February is Bike Week. There'll be thousands of bikers from all over the country that are going to Daytona Beach to get some suntan, to get out of the cold and enjoy the beach. And they have their big bike week down there. I said, "Nah, that still doesn't sound good." And they said, "Well, the week following that's the Daytona 500. Well, there'll be thousands of people down there. You're going to make a lot of money, Curtis." "No, not interested. Don't want to do that." He said, "Well, then listen here, Curtis." He kind of knew me. He went to college with me. He said the week after that, around March 1st, starts what they call spring break. And there will be about 200,000 fresh little college girls coming down to the beach for 1 week. And your job is to make sure that they get deep, dark, and delicious. And I said, "I'm coming down." And that was in December. I was down there at the end of January. At the end of January, when I got down there, they had a cold front come through, and up in northern Florida, it got down to like 29. Me and two other boys that had come down from Detroit, Michigan, we were sleeping in the same bed trying to survive. It was so dang cold in the hotel room they had us at. And so we went through Bike Week, went through the 500, and here they came. And these little girls were coming in twos, fours, fives, and it was unreal. Now there were guys coming too, but most of these girls left most of their boyfriends were at home, and their job was to come down and get a suntan. And I had to learn about this suntan lotion that they had. They had we had paramino benzoic acid was the PABA they called it, was the sunscreen at that time. And men and women burn differently. Men will burn the tops of their feet. Women burn the top of their chest, breast lines. The kneecaps will get burnt. And what'll happen if you don't put these certain screens on there, you're going to get burnt. And I tell these little girls, and they don't have money to, and this lotion was sitting. We got these tiki huts out there. I've got a boy and a girl, and I'm training them. And I tell these folks, this is how we do it. You take the little girl's arm if you're a boy, or if you're a man, and if it's a girl, do the opposite, and rub some lotion on them and tell them you've always got to have a person of the opposite sex to supply the suntan lotion. Well, what that does is it decreases sexual tension. Your pores will open up and you'll get a better suntan. And they're looking at you, and then you tell them, "I'll meet you at PJ's, the bar, at 4 o'clock, and I'll buy you beers." This went on for 8 weeks, John, and it was unreal. I was making thousands of dollars a day. Wet T-shirt contests, beer drinking contests. These kids are down here to have fun, and this was way back. This was way back in 1981. And this was unbelievable because at Friday after that, there they went. And here come the buses and here came the planes and then the next group. So for a young guy, my sponsor, Tim, has me tell that story, Curtis. It's the greatest story any drunk could ever hear. I said, "No, I'm tired of telling that story." But the real story, John, comes at the end of that 8 weeks. I was standing out there on one of the pool decks and with a friend of mine, Joey Manchisi. I remember it like it was yesterday. And Joey was an Italian boy. His dad owned two of the hotels, and he would hang out with me because he knew every day drinking and partying with these girls that he was going to get a girl. Because I had the leverage as the suntan lotion guy. These girls would just flock around me at that time. I had long blonde hairs, looked like a surfer dude. I don't know what it was. And here came out walking on this pool deck these two young girls with long brown hair, and they were absolutely stunning. And I said, "Joey, which one you want?" And I wanted the one on the right. And he said, "No, I want the one on the right." I said, "Dang, that's the one I wanted." And I said, "Okay, I'll take the one on the left." His dad owned the hotel. These ladies came walking up to us just smiling. It's beautiful. I said, "Ladies, where are you from?" They said, "Kentucky." I'd never heard that dialect. Look, I said, "Where?" And they said, "Louisville, Kentucky." And that was my first initiated meeting with my wife, Tina Jo. And this April 30th, we'll have been married 43 years.
Fantastic.
I fell in love with this woman immediately. We spent the week together. She went back. She was in her junior year at college. We dated by air for a year, and And I got transferred down into Miami, got into the things, the aircraft and all this kind of stuff, and ended up getting out of the suntan lotion business and got in with a law firm. And ended up meeting all the politicians, the DEA agents, the FBI agents, the judges in South Florida. Go ahead.
Were you when you say in with a law firm, were you a lawyer or just working with the firm?
No, that's a whole different story too. I had a boat downtown in Miami at a place called the Four Ambassadors, and it was a big place on Brickell Avenue. Brickell Avenue was they say that's where all the lords from the cocaine lords from Colombia, and not the Cubans or the Mexicans. They were in another area. This was the big stuff, and I had a boat there, and I ended up meeting a fellow that was one of the two biggest attorneys in the state of Florida, personal injury, and young guys, young Jewish guys. And he said to me, Curtis, after he got to meet me, and his boat, his 56-foot Hatteras, was about to sink one day, and it was raining, and I jumped on the thing and got the bilge pumps going back on for him, and we were close friends. And he said, I got a job for you. And I said, what's that? And I said, I think you'd be a great private investigator. I said, I don't know anything about that. He said, no, you'd be perfect for me and Steve Deutsch. And I said, well, tell me about it. And I ended up with that firm. And it was big time stuff. I mean, these guys were referral attorneys. And I'm a brilliant person. I'm a smart person. And even having that, now during this period of time, Tina and I are dating, and on April 30th, 1983, we were married up in Kentucky. She came back down with me in Miami. So we're downtown in the element of this wonderful South Florida, all the money and this and that. I've just got beautiful wife. We have our first daughter. Uh, after 5 years of marriage, and I'm off to federal prison for conspiracy to import excess of 5 kilograms of cocaine. We were smuggling tons. And there's a lot in between that story, but it all has to do with alcoholism. The alcoholism took me over. Not just the drinking. It wasn't just the drinking. I was drinking just about every day. I could drink beer. I wasn't a hard alcoholic drinker, but I drank. My wife was not a drinker. Still to the day is not a drinker. I've seen her drunk maybe twice out of 43 years of marriage almost. But go ahead.
Let me tap the brakes there a little bit, just because I know people are going to be listening and go, smuggling guns. Well, so let me just say this: people can't see you, kind of and what you look like. But if I were to see, and I've been thinking about this lately, like when I'm sitting in restaurants sometimes, there'll be somebody sitting there, they're fairly nondescript, right? Maybe a little bit more elderly. And you think of them as just a nice gentleman or lady. And then you go, well, wait a sec, they probably have a backstory. There's no telling what have happened. So we've talked to you now about smuggling guns, smuggling drugs, building, landing airports on our last episode we were on, and you were involved in a lot of things. You just can't tell a book by its cover. I'll put it that way. And so when you say you were smuggling guns, I mean, how does that work? I'm just curious myself.
Well, at that time, and there was a friend of mine that was very famous. His name was Barry Seal. Barry was out of Louisiana. He was a TWA pilot, and there's another book that just came out that was a partner of his. They were coming up the west area. They were coming through Panama. Way back in the early '80s, the Republicans were trying to get money from the Congress, Ollie North, to
Yep.
take the money down to stop the Sandinistas that were communists that were taking over Nicaragua. Well, the Democrats said, no, you're not going to go take over their thing, and they couldn't work on any money. And what had happened is they worked out a deal between themselves, the two parties, and the arms got flown south, and the dope came back. And that's pretty much what that was about. They needed arms down there in order to get to the troops that they had stationed in and around there. Well, once that didn't subside, but was the other thing that came out of it was kings of cocaine. It was when the cocaine war was really beginning down out of South America. There were the Ochoa brothers, the Pablo Escobar, and the guy I pretty much worked for was Carlos Lader that owned Norman's Cay in the Bahamas. So we were coming up a whole different side of the world. Those other guys were coming there, but it didn't matter. It was the biggest business, and it is still today. Uh, and it was funny because
So
the
let
many,
me ask you
many
this real quick. I've always heard that once you get in, you really can't get out, so to speak. But you are out. So how does that exit happen? Like, do you just like send them a resignation letter someday, email or something? How does that happen?
well, no, you go to prison. My resume is fantastic. If I need to go back down and fly, I'm sure I can go back down and fly. But the only good thing that comes out of that, John, is free room and board.
Yeah.
So let me tell you about this. So I end up going away to federal prison. And my last 5 years were spent at Eglin Air Force Base in Northwest Florida. Eglin Air Force Base was a wonderful place. It was a minimum security prison where you'd be there, and Tina would come down from Kentucky about once a month. They'd either fly or drive down. Her and Natalie Marie, my daughter, was just born, and I had to go away. Got another college degree while I was in federal prison, especially down in Northwest Florida. And you're down there and you're meeting all kinds of people. You're meeting state and federal senators, House representatives, bankers, all the people that steal all the money from everybody. Those guys are at this place. And there used to be a story that, oh, you go to Eglin, you get the golf. Well, you don't get the golf, you get to pick up cigarette butts on the golf course. That's the, but I myself, listen to this story. I was the head of We had 4 tennis courts on Eglin Air Force Base. The base commander, the military owns the military base. The government does. Federal Bureau of Prisons represents the Federal Bureau, and they have their facilities on these places. Well, when I first got there, it wasn't so fun. I think I worked in a laundry, but that was okay because you're at a minimum. You don't even have a fence, but you're going to be there. Me, the next 5 years, as I worked my way out of the system, and we had these 4 tennis courts, and we would play tennis. Well, I ended up being the number 1 rated tennis player in the Federal Bureau of Prisons. People in other throughout the country, they knew about it. They were Curtis Johnson. This guy, he can really play tennis. And I taught tennis to over 680 men every week to give them something to do. And we had tournaments, we had it all. But the biggest thing I did, John, is I taught tennis to the base commander and all the lieutenant colonels that knew my whole story. They knew I was famous. Tell us the story. I said, you want to know the story? You get to stay here for free, room and board. You don't want to do it. You don't get paid like you do. But I became very good friends with those people. And after that, in August 18th of 94, I was able to get out. And when I got out, I became six. Go ahead.
So you mentioned about your wife Tina coming to see you during that time. I am very interested in her. She stuck it out. I mean, what was it? 9 years? Is that what you said? 9 years?
96 months since the
Nine?
indictment. Yes.
Yeah. And what was from her perspective? I know you can't tell her story totally, but how did she deal with that during that time and having a new baby girl and all that stuff?
Well, still, even so today, we talk about that, and she'll ask the question, "Why would you have done that?" And I said, "There's no explanation for it. You don't need to know the why. It was done, but it was all about them. It was about the ego, and most people, their wives didn't stay with them that long.
Mhm.
Very rarely. I was taught early on going into federal prison, don't think you can get on the phone and tell your wife what to do. Because if you do, she won't be there when you get out. But we have a relationship even today that is beyond belief. And we truly believe it was just part of the plan, and it was God's plan. When I came out of prison, I went back to school at the University of Louisville. This time, went into their, international marketing programs, and I became very successful in business, even as a felon, and have been so all my life until the age of 56, where it all ended. And at the age of 56, I was put in 3 times in a row into a detox center at a homeless shelter in Louisville, Kentucky. The alcohol had finally taken me down. And it's the greatest thing that ever happened. You know, Tina would say, "Can't you just stop?" I'm trying. I couldn't. I didn't know anything about AA. I knew nothing about it. I had a neighbor. I had a lawyer, actually a lawyer neighbor that lived next to us where we lived in Louisville, Kentucky, that said, "Curtis, you ever been to AA?" I mean, he knew I was a drunk. I mean, business drunk, flying over all over the world, even still doing business, all these things that I was marketing and selling. But everything had to be on the golf course, drinking, 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 and drinking. And I truly believe, John, why that moment then in 19, it would have been 2009 when I finally, for the first time, went into the detox center and stayed there for 7 months, that my life began to change. And I was introduced to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I was in AA for just short of 4 years. I went through a big health issue with cancer at my first part of sobriety, but at just short of 4 years, I was at a meeting and I watched two old timers with like 34, 35 years of sobriety run about 24 young girls out of that room. It was a big book study that my neighbor did, and one of them had said something about a drug. This isn't a drug talk. This is that. Get the f out of there. And I walked out with him, and I didn't know why I walked out with him. I was just heartbroken watching these girls getting effed out of this AA meeting, and these guys were old stouch, AA. They didn't want to hear anything. They didn't know how to get to these ladies to explain really what this thing was about. And they still, to the day, that women's healing place cannot go to that care center where that meeting was at. And that was way back in, that would have been around 2013, something around there. But anyway, I walked away for a year and a half with a little bit of drinking, not anything like before. But I was the most miserable person I had ever been in my life, more so than even being locked up and sober, because I had found the solution and I knew where it was at. And after a year and a half, I sat on Tim's board of a place called the Men's Talbot House in Louisville, Kentucky. And I called Tim and I said, "Tim," I called him and said, "I'm going to be stepping away." And he said, "Curtis, we'll be waiting for you." Just like that. This wonderful businessman, wonderful AA man that he's up in Illinois. I think Tim's got 36 years of sobriety now. Wonderful, wonderful person. And he said, "We'll be waiting for you." And after about a year and a half, I called him on a Wednesday afternoon. I said, "Tim, I've got to get back in the rooms." And he said, "We've been waiting for you, Curtis. Big book study in my office this afternoon at 5:45. I said, "Well, we'll see you then." And I walked in that door and I haven't stopped. And when I say I haven't stopped is I came into this thing prepared to do whatever I had to do. And it was a complete, more so we call it the psychic change that Dr. Silkworth talks about. And it's a 180-degree change in my thought process. Even today, I'll make it simple like this. If I want to go right, I have to consider left. Because our thinking is our problem. As Chuck Chamberlain talked about, you can't think your way into a new way of living. You have to learn to live your way into a new way of thinking. So what I began to do and understand, I got involved with more spiritual teachers, the spiritual part of the program. And I have evolved today, after these last 10 plus years. And I think one of the greatest things in AA that happened was the ability to meet people like you on this type of a meeting when COVID hit. And when COVID hit, next thing you know, you're talking, I think I've talked in 18 countries. I still to the day, sometimes 3, 4 times a week. Yet I go to 5, 6 live meetings every week because this is the form of life that I need. And it isn't for me that needs it. It might be for those that are there. And my job is to give it back. If my presence isn't there, my presence can't be given away. And no matter what we do or where we are, or whether we're around my grandchildren, I tell a story. Let me tell this story real short. About 6 years ago, our daughter, Natalie Marie, is just a wonderful, wonderful daughter. She's married to a fellow, Brian S. and Sossman is their last name. They don't care if I use their name. They're up in Johnstown, Ohio, but they were in um, Columbus about 5 or 6 years ago, and I was standing in the backyard talking to Steve Sossman, Brian's dad, my son-in-law's father, a good Baptist guy, never drank, never drugged, anything, this and that. And we're talking. He said, "Curtis, I got to tell you a story." I said, "What's that, Steve?" He said, "I've never seen two little grandchildren. We have two grandkids. Let's see. Hadley Marie will be 11 on the 14th of December, and Grace and Matthew will be 13th on the 28th of January. And they are two of the greatest little grandkids in the world. And we're sitting there. I'm talking to my father-in-law, or my son-in-law's father, and he said, "I've never seen two little grandkids talk about their pappy or talk about somebody like they talk about you." And my head starts to swell. I always tell the people I work with, shrink the mind and open the heart. And here my head swelling up, the ego taking over. And I said, "Oh, Steve," I said, "they talk about you and Janet all the time." He says, "No, they talk about Pappy and Grammy. They talk about you two all the time." And it just made me feel real good. And as we're standing there, he looked me in the eye and he says, "I think it's that AA stuff." Now I really became infected with ego. I'm going, "Oh my gosh, he knows my whole story from way back until the present." So that was just an unbelievable opportunity to hear somebody else. See, we don't understand what I call it. And I was talking to a fellow I sponsor. He's got 40 years today on the phone. I said, it's about being in tune. It's like a car, airplane, or a boat. If we're not in tune, we run ragged. But when we're in tune with ourselves and God, we emitted what's called an aura. And the aura is the energy that becomes within. Sometimes I feel like I'm a piece of flypaper. I can't keep people off, and I hadn't even opened my mouth yet. And that's the gift. So we're sitting there, and he tells me that. And I hadn't even told Tina that. About a month and a half later, when we lived in Louisville, beautiful home, 5-bedroom house, 4 bath, and out basement walkout where my mother-in-law had lived, and she passed away in 2022. And it was a Sunday afternoon after church, after mass, and we're all sitting upstairs at the big table looking out at the woods, and she was making her famous chicken dinner. And my daughter and her husband, my grandkids, a couple of the neighbors, and my in-laws were sitting there at the table eating this chicken, and we're sitting there at the far end of this table of about 9 or 10 people is my little granddaughter Hattie. Now she would have been either 4 or 5 at that time, maybe 5. And she's just eating her chicken away, and she looks up at me and she says, "Hey, Pappy, you going to one of those meetings tonight?" I was stunned. We never talked about meetings. It didn't matter. That wasn't even a subject. And I looked around the table, John. I looked at my wife, my daughter, the in-law. I looked at everybody in the eye. And I looked back at little we call her Hattie. I said, "Hattie, yep, Pappy's going to one of those meetings." Because whether it's up in Ohio, whether it's here in Kentucky, whether it's down at our place in Perdido Key, whether it's in Mexico, whether it's at Disney, I have to find a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, because it's you people that have saved my life. You gave me the directional tool map to find the treasure chest I've been looking for all my life, and that treasure chest resides within. So I think I'm okay right then. But off to the right side is my grandson, Grayson Matthew. Grayson Matthew's going to be 13 in about 3 years ago. He did a space camp, and he's a brilliant kid at 13. I mean, I don't even believe he needs to go to college. He's so smart. We've got flight simulators for him for Christmas this year. He's not going to be the guy I was. He's going to be somebody different. But he taps me on the shoulder, John, left shoulder, and I'm going, "Oh no." And I look over at him, and this is after Hattie had done that. And everybody was just amazed. They're laughing and joking around. And Grayson looks at me, he says, "Pappy," he says, "what do you guys do at those meetings?" And he was as sincere as he could be. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to talk to a 7-year-old boy and tell him what you do at those meetings. And I looked around at my wife. I had tears coming down my face, my daughter, that whole table. And I looked at Grayson, and God did the talking. And I looked at Grayson. I said, "Grayson, this is where Grammys and Pappies, where we go and learn how to be better Grammys and Pappies." That little boy looked at me for about 30 seconds, and then he pointed his finger and he said, "Pappy, you keep doing that." Folks, that's the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's the gift that God's given each and every one of us in order to give back that what's been so truly and freely given. And even to the day, now this was back, 5 or 6 years ago, I've been up to Columbus to visit, yet I'm speaking up there. I just spoke in big corrections. I do a ton of work with corrections. my good friend Harold Long out of St. Louis, and many other people. And we do a lot of work with corrections. I ran for the state of Kentucky. They call it the SAP program, Substance Abuse Program. I do a meeting once a week. Um, for the last 10 years to 75 men that are trying the last 6 months of their prison sentences, trying to get prepared to what's out there. And the only thing I can tell them and share my experience with them is that the hand of Alcoholics Anonymous, the hand of AA is waiting there for them. So that's the opportunity that you have. But for me, I had to go through this whole thing, and at 56 I would question this God. Why did you make me wait this long? But I had to go back and reflect on what my mother said. This is all part of God's plan for you. This is your plan, Curtis. A lot of people that get sober, and I've seen John early on, don't really understand, and it takes a long time to really get what I truly believe is the spiritual part of this whole program. This has very little, even Dr. Silkworth talked about that. Until that person has that psychic change, also known as a spiritual awakening, there's very little chance of any recovery from the disease of alcoholism. We can't, God can. I always say when I share, I said the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous will get you closer to God. And when you get closer to God, anything can happen. And this thing changes each and every moment. And I've done tons of, I talked about Richard Rohr. Thomas Keating is another big man that I've studied and done a lot. Carl Jung, we had Carl Jung that went to Roland Hazard, that went to Abby Thatcher, that went to Bill Wilson to Dr. Bob, and Dr. Bob to all of us. And here we are, this fellowship of people from all over the world now. They're striving for this same thing and carry the message. We call it sobriety, but it goes way beyond that, because it really truly is, to me, the most spiritual way that I've found that God of my understanding. And what's happened since that is when I go to my church, my Catholic church, I can listen, I can hear in a whole different manner. It's the thing. The human mind lives in a resentful past and a fearful future, unable to understand the moment that we're even experiencing. That's just the way. It's called a dualistic mind. Until we get what we call being contemplative, is where we're living in the moment, and that's all it is. And the moment is just dissipated. It's gone. So how do we prepare for that? And I tell you, I just had a good friend of mine that I lost his wife 2 days ago, and we've talked a couple times already, and Tuesday will be her funeral. And he's an older guy. He's been in AA a long time, 30-some years, and he's hurting. I said, but this is the only thing that I can tell them. My experience. We can't get faith by just believing. We can believe in whatever we want to believe in, but without the action that we find to do in Alcoholics Anonymous, we can never experience the faith. And the faith is experienced to what we experience each and every day. So ironically, every day is a new day that we've never experienced before, and we have the opportunity to be better than we've ever experienced. But throughout those days, John, and I tell folks this all the time when I share, and especially when I'm working with us, I truly believe that we have to face darkness just about each and every day in order to understand just how bright the light is. And the light I'm referring to is the divine spark, as Don called it, that's within each and every one of us. In the presence of the God, when we get into the 10th step where we've entered the world of the Spirit, this is the whole echelon of everything that God's brought me up to today. Enter the world of the Spirit, to where I know if I'm going to lie to you, I know I'm going to lie to you before I lie to you. So why lie to you? This is what we've done. We've taken a backpack that we've carried all our life that got so heavy we had to get away from the backpack. We drank or we drugged or we were just a miserable person. But the 12 steps, these spiritual steps, the willingness to surrender our way of thinking in order to find the new way of living. We had to, first of all, the second and third step, why are they there? No one wants to talk about God when you're in jail or you're on the bottom someplace, but just to introduce that there's something. There's going to be something that's going to guide you. And we get into the fourth and fifth step, and we begin to look at those columns, and we get to understand, holy cow, fear, hate, illusion, all the things that we did, the real who I am. And, this is where we go from the false self to the true self, to where we begin to understand, why we're here today, this short period of life. I truly believe that we're spiritual beings just stopping off for a short human experience,
Mhm.
because we talk about that in the big book. Right before we go into step 3, Don talked about that. He said, for 42 years, he'd read this thing thousands of times. And until he and I talked about it, and it says right before we go into the 3rd step, as we begin to draw nearer and closer to God, we begin to lose fear of today, tomorrow, or the hereafter. We were reborn. Now, here's a bankrupt stockbroker in Bill Wilson, and a proctologist that couldn't cover his bottom end in Dr. Bob talking about hereafter. This is how spiritual the big book really is. And for some people, maybe it's not there, but I'm telling you, there's a solution, and that solution, that the big book will guide you, and it'll guide you into the opportunity to find what you need to find. And for me, what I had to find was me. What truly am I? What is this soul within? Why am I here today? Why did I have to go through open heart surgery? I don't question anything anymore. I don't make as many errors today. I'm old. I'm almost 73, where I don't have to remember as much and I can forget everything. My wife hates it when I say that, but it's the truth. It's the truth.
I hear you, brother.
It's the reality of being able to be aware. And awareness is the whole about the book of the Alcoholics Anonymous. The disease of alcoholism was the greatest gift I was ever given, because it was the only thing that God said, okay, Chris, I'll throw you on the ground and you won't be able to get up. Are you going to be willing to change? And it happened. And today I can say that, contingent on the daily maintenance of my spiritual conditioning, I'm okay. I'm okay talking to you. I'm not afraid to talk to anybody about this, because not only me, I do a lot of consulting work with business people. Not even in the program. They don't have to, they're just miserable people. What do you mean, Curtis? I said, you probably hate yourself. No, I make a lot of money. I said, might be the problem. I said, you're still worried about the self, right? I said, why don't you get involved with those people you work with? Why don't you go out there and see how they're doing, how they're struggling? Get those concerns out of yourself and give them, take care of the concerns of others. And we do this. We'll come out of our beautiful St. Michael Catholic Church, and we'll be at the Kroger store shopping after Mass on Sunday, and I'll end up talking to somebody on an aisle, and my wife will say, "Who was that?" And I said, "I don't know." And I said, "You don't know? Well, what were you talking about?" And I said, "I don't know that either." And she laughs, because she knows. All it takes is a smile. All it takes is a hello to maybe make somebody else's day. And this is the real gift. This is the gift of service. This is an action program. Can't just sit here and not do it. You got to do what like stuff you're doing, John. We got to be willing to do the things we don't want to do. That human mind thrives on not having to do it. When we go back into the step work, and we get to character defects, and we get to our shortcomings, how many times is, I'm not going to answer that phone, or I'll get it tomorrow. If you're thinking about it today, you got to get it today, not tomorrow. I'll tell one other story quick that I love. I got a friend of mine, Ricky V, lives down we're on a huge lake, lives down at the other end. Ricky's been sober 42 years. And he said to me about 6 months ago, he said, Curtis, I got to make amends to somebody. I said, what? I said, who do you need to make amends for? You've been sober a long. My first wife for 43 years. I said, Ricky. I said, what in the world do you need to make amends to your first wife? Well, I don't know. She keeps coming up, and I keep thinking about her. I just, we're friends, and we got 2 kids together, but that was 43 years ago. I said, Rick, you might hurt her more than help her. She said, well, how do I stop thinking about her? I said, let me give you something to do. I said, every time you start thinking about that wife, look down on the ground and find something to pick up. He said, what? I said, pick up a rock, a piece of trash, do something. Pick it, identify it, and pick it up, and you'll be okay. He goes, you're crazy. About 2 weeks later, I get a phone call from Ricky V. He said, I did it. I said, you did what? I started picking stuff up. I said, and I'm not thinking about her. I said, keep coming back. you know. But those are the things, just the little elements that we're so busy coagulating all this stuff in the mind. And I tell folks all the time, we have to learn to think from the heart and not the mind. Think how you would want them to treat you as you treat them. And this goes all the way back to the Jesus. He said the greatest commandment ever given was is that we're to trust God with all our mind, heart, soul, and strength. And like unto it, we're to help our brothers and sisters as we would want them to help us in our time of need. That's the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And to live that on a daily basis, to understand that through darkness, it doesn't matter because it's all going to be okay. It doesn't have to be better than, doesn't have to be less than, but whatever we learn to experience, it's going to be okay. And there's no way in the world that I could have ever imagined being able to live in that compassionate thought process, to be able to live compassionately that way. We live out in Taylorsville, Kentucky, and we have a beautiful, huge piece of property, and there's deer everywhere, turkeys, and right off the big lake, and it's just, it's unreal. I'm sitting in my office downstairs. The windows are huge. It's a walk-up basement. I look out. I'll go get on my 4x4, my side-by-side. We went out and Tina cut pine today for the some of the stuff she's decorating in the house for the holidays, and it's a remarkable thing, the opportunity that we receive from Alcoholics Anonymous. But through Alcoholics Anonymous, I truly believe is the God of our understanding, John.
Curtis, I had no idea what to expect coming in to record you, but I'm really glad that we had this chance to sit here together. You have had quite a full life and a blessed life, as you know, ups and downs. And I'm so glad we got to spend some time and share your experience, strength, and hope with all of our listeners. I'm going to read from page 164 of the Big Book now to close us out. It says, abandon yourself to God as you understand God. Admit your faults to Him and to your fellows. Clear away the wreckage of your past. Give freely of what you find and join us. We shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit, and you will surely meet some of us, like me and Curtis J., as you trudge the road of happy destiny. May God bless you and keep you until then. Once again, Curtis, thank you so much for spending time with me.
Amen. Thanks, John.
Mr. Curtis J. once again, thank you so much. It was a pleasure spending time with you, and I'm glad we got to meet each other once again. As I mentioned on the beginning of this episode, Curtis has a daily text. At least he sends to me. I don't know how to get on the list or whatever. I didn't really ask him, but I'm telling you that if you're interested in it, send me an email to John, John, at soberspeak.com, and I'll send your information on to Curtis, and he will pre-screen you to see if you're eligible for his daily text. Now, on to a little bit of listener feedback. Jose. Okay, so Jose, if you are out there, you sent in a voicemail, but I could tell you were probably in a car, you were traveling, something like that. And I could tell it was a really nice voicemail, but it wasn't clear enough for me to play on the on the podcast. So I would absolutely love for you to go ahead and hit that little voicemail button again. And by the way, if you're wondering where this is, you could just click on it in your show notes, or you can go to our website. There's a contact us tab, and it allows you to leave a voicemail. I've gotten some pretty interesting ones over the years. Some of them kind. Most of them, the vast majority, were kind. Others were like, "Oh, John M., we can't handle you. You stink," that sort of thing. And that's okay. I'm not everyone's cup of tea. But anyway, if Jose, I would love for you to go back and re-record that, and I'll be glad to play it on the podcast. Gene M. writes in, and the subject line is Ricky R. episode 287 in Jacksonville, Texas. And he says, hi, John, I'm looking for the written workshop that Ricky made. Do you have a link to that? I really love the idea and I want to share with my sponsor. Any information would be greatly appreciated. Gene M. And he is from the You Never Walk Alone group in Pointe Claire, Quebec, Canada. So, if you are from that group, You Never Walk Alone in Pointe Claire, Quebec, Canada, next time you see Gene M., you can say, hey, I heard John M. reading about you on the podcast the other day. Anyway, thanks for, and as you know, Gene, I replied, got you in touch with Ricky, and he's pointing you in the right direction. In fact, Ricky had some more workshops he was doing in California for that very subject, and he invited you to come along and, listen in. I think it was a Zoom meeting. Listen in on that particular that conference. What do you call it? Workshop? I think is what you would call it. But anyway. All right. And anyway, here we go. Oh my goodness. I don't have the name. Okay. So this is a guy. Oh, this is from last week. He wrote in and he wanted the files to Dave F's, Dave's with that a workshop that he did with Mark Houston. And so I replied and got him in touch with that guy. And he said, thanks, John and David. I received the files. Note, I am in Midland, Texas, 2001 sobriety date. Haven't had a drink, but sure have had those flat, scary, frustrating spots. I relate to everything you guys and Mark discussed in episode number 437, and I'm looking forward to reviewing the files you just sent. I'm currently in a new peaceful bliss, and I'm trying to help others where I can with those spots. This resonates now. The last two paragraphs in Bill's emotional sobriety letter is thus. I think it can work out with some emotional sobriety. And this is from Bill Wilson. He says, if we examine every disturbance we have, great or small, we find that at the root of it, some unhealthy dependency is consequentially an unhealthy demand. Let us, with God's help, continually surrender these hobbling demands. Bill had some good language, didn't he? Then we can be set free to live and love. We may then be able to do the 12-step ourselves and others that we may then be able to 12-step ourselves and others into emotional sobriety. Of course, I haven't offered you a really new idea, only a gimmick that has started to unhook several of my own, quote, hexes at depth. Nowadays, my brain no longer races compulsively in either elation, grandiosity, or depression. I have been given a quiet place in the bright sunshine. Bill Wilson, 1958. And then he ends it with, gotcha, Bill. So very cool. That's a great reading. I love it. And, I just thought about something. Bill wrote all this. You know how we can all go to the internet nowadays and say, give me another word for grandiosity or whatever it is. And then it just oh my goodness, something just caught my attention. I did not press anything, but I noticed that like Siri is recording all my words up there on this Apple. I don't know what's going on, but nonetheless, so, but he didn't have that, that ability to go look up all the other words. I don't know how he found them. Maybe he had a dictionary. Maybe his brain was just that bright. I don't know, but I could definitely not come up with all those other words for either grandiosity, elation, depression, whatever the case may be. I think it's fantastic what he did. All right. Anyway, Travis writes in, and Travis says, "Hey, John, this is Travis from Squim. Travis has written us in before. I love it when Travis writes in. He says, just wanted to say hello and thank you for all that you do. I listen every morning at work for 2 hours. I'm slowly getting through all the episodes in order. Almost every morning I think I should write John and tell him how much I appreciated the episode, and then the day gets away from me. So here I am on my lunch dropping you a line. I really like the English guy, episode 340 or something or so. He says, my mom is from Paisley and I love that side of the world. Even the English. He says, sorry, a bit of Scottish humor there. I completely understand from talking to my grandmother what you mean. By the way, that English guy, his name is John R., is coming back to record another episode with me very soon. So look forward to that. Anyway, he says, I also wanted to thank you for talking about Ted Lasso so much. I finally gave it a view, and me and my wife love it. Very cool. I am so glad you and your wife loved it. And then he says, keep up the good work. May God bless you and keep you as we trudge this road together. Travis L. 210 of 22. Very cool. You know, I thought there was something in this. Forgive me if I didn't get this right. I thought, Travis, you were the one who sent me that's what happened. I left this out accidentally reading this. He says, I've been married for a year today, and it wouldn't be possible without the rooms of AA sponsorship and a willingness to do whatever it takes to recover. I think that's fantastic, Travis. God bless you. God bless your wife. And if she's listening to this, please give her, well, you wouldn't have to give her my best if she's listening to it. I will give her my best audibly here so she doesn't have to get it from you. It's more of a direct connection. You know what I mean? You don't have to pass it on. Anyway, all right, that's enough out of me. That is one more episode of Sober Speak in the books. I take this 1 week at a time. I hope to be back next week. You never can tell. But may God bless you and keep you until then. Keep coming back. It works if you work it. Thanks for listening in, everybody. I'm struggling today. Thank you. Bye-bye.